is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Freedom Fire Podcast, where we want to stoke the flames of freedom every single day. My name is Kendall Bowman, and ladies and gentlemen, could we be seeing the end, not just in some states, but the complete end of abortion in the United States? Well, let's check out this story. From the Hill, Alabama Supreme Court rules frozen embryos are children. Boy, this is a huge story that could have massive implications if this case is appealed, if this case is furthered up to the Supreme Court. This could have insane levels of consequences that could have, in my opinion, would be good to save the lives of unborn children. But for many other people who like to kill babies, this could, let me just say this. This could ultimately cause a civil war in this country. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. How could you even say anything like this? That's so like black pill doomer. Like, what are you talking about? Well, let me get into it. I'm gonna explain. But let's get into the story. Alabama's Supreme Court has ruled that frozen embryos are children under state law and subject to legislation dealing with the wrongful death of a minor, stating that it applies to all unborn children regardless of their location. Boy. So you see right there from the outset of reading this article here, the consequences that this could have if raised to the Supreme Court, if appealed to the Supreme Court. Boy, we're skating on thin ice, ladies and gentlemen. The court issued this majority decision in a lawsuit brought forth by a group of in vitro fertilization, or IVF, patients whose frozen embryos were destroyed in December 2020 when a patient removed the embryos from a cryogenic storage unit and dropped them on the ground. The plaintiffs subsequently filed 2 lawsuits against the facilities, the Center for Reproductive Medicine, alleging that the clinic had violated Alabama's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, which applies to unborn children. The plaintiffs also alternatively alleged negligence on the part of the clinic and sought compensatory damages, though the claims of negligence were specified to only be pleaded if Alabama courts or the U.S. Supreme Court decided frozen embryos were not children. The defendants' motion to dismiss the lawsuit were granted by a trial court that found a frozen embryo did not fall within the definition of a person or child. The court also ruled that the plaintiffs could not proceed with their calls for compensatory damages for the loss of human life and emotional damages, citing long-lasting legal standards in Alabama. In its decision, the Alabama Supreme Court did not address the question of whether extrauterine children should be treated as human beings, but it did find that the state law did not specify what state an unborn child is to be in. The relevant statutory text is clear. The Wrongful Death of a Minor Act applies on its face to all unborn children without limitation, the court's decision stated. The court found that there is no unwritten exception, as the defendants have argued, to the law that applies to unborn children who are not physically located in utero, that is inside a biological uterus at the time they are killed. The defendants had also argued that considering frozen embryos as children would result in numerous consequences, including making IVF substantially more expensive and preserving embryos more onerous. Onerous? Goodness. English is hard, guys. I apologize. While we appreciate the defendants' concerns, these types of policy-focused arguments belong before the legislature, not this court, the ruling stated. The ruling was issued by Alabama Supreme Court Justice Jay Mitchell, with 7 of the other 8 justices concurring. So, what are the consequences of this? Well, ultimately, the consequences of this is that if this stays in Alabama, then it applies in Alabama. However, there is a situation where there is a path that this could take where this is appealed to the Supreme Court. I don't know if that is how that's going to happen. I don't know when or if that could happen. I have no idea. Ultimately, This article does not touch on when that could happen, so I'm not sure. But guys, the ramifications for this could be serious. They could be very serious. Okay? Ultimately, let's talk about if this goes to the Supreme Court. Ultimately, the Supreme Court has to make a ruling. If they choose to say that embryos are not children, are not human beings, then ultimately we've got, I mean, my goodness, then where does life begin? If life does not begin at conception, then where does it begin? That's the question. That's the $1 million question. Well, I say it's the $1 million question. Science has already answered this question, but there's a lot of people out there that choose not to believe the science. Boy, does that sound familiar. Goodness gracious. Ultimately, guys, if the Supreme Court chooses to say that embryos are not beings or are not children, are not classified as human beings, I don't know where we go from there, man. I don't know. What would happen with the laws? Would abortion be allowed all over the country at that point? I don't know. Ultimately, I'm not a lawyer, but these are the questions that would need to be asked. You can give me your best answer down in the comment section if you're a lawyer. But I think where we would know, where something that we do know, is that if the Supreme Court did find that, well, I guess it would. If they do find that embryos are not human beings, are not children, then ultimately I think abortion would be allowed nationwide. If they find that they are children and that they are human beings and that life does begin at conception and that these human beings in the womb do have the same rights that you and I have, then ultimately what we have is a situation where essentially, at least in my opinion, abortion would essentially be banned across the entire country. Okay? Now, as to what exceptions might be given, I don't know. Like I said, this is a hypothetical situation. This has not gone up to the Supreme Court yet. At least as of what this article says, I don't think it has been appealed to the Supreme Court. Okay? Even if it were appealed to the Supreme Court, they would have to accept it and want to actually hear the case, which, my goodness. I mean, they already heard Roe v. Wade, and that was something that brought quite a lot of drama to the United States, put quite a lot of pressure onto the Supreme Court justices. But this has major ramifications, okay? Before we get into the idea of are these human beings or not, let's talk about the ramifications let's talk about the consequences of the decision that the Supreme Court could make. Ultimately, the Supreme Court could choose to say that whether they are a human being or they are not. Either way, either decision could result in violence. This is what we have to understand, okay? Either result could bring on the possibility of violence. States could secede from the union. I'm dead serious. You think that I'm being hyperbolic? You think that I'm trying to? Guys, there's already secessionist movements all over. Like think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of Alabama. Okay, Alabama is a state that they believe, and I believe this as well as a Christian. I truly believe that from conception that is a human being, and I'm going to get into the scientific aspects of that here in just a second. But I truly believe, and so does the state of Alabama, or at least the majority of people in the state of Alabama, believe that life begins at conception, that these are human beings, and that they should have the same rights that you and I have. Or at least they should have a right to life. Okay? They should have Excuse me, my goodness. They should have the right to not be killed. Now, I want you to imagine that someone is now telling you that in your mind, this is how it comes across in your mind. Put yourself in the shoes of Alabama. This is how this is going to come across in their mind. I want you to imagine somebody tells you, you have to allow babies to be murdered. Now, you yourself might not think about it that way, but the state of Alabama does. And so does the state of Texas. And so do many other states in this country. Okay? And like I said, I'm going to get into the science here in just a second. Now, let's go the other route. Let's say the Supreme Court says that these are human beings and that abortion is basically now banned. Okay? Put yourself in the shoes of California. Oh, they want to control women's bodies. Now, I personally see that as ridiculous because you had a choice when you chose to have sex. You should have either chosen to use some kind of contraceptive or you should have just chosen simply to not have sex. That's the reality. If you did not want to have a kid, you should not be partaking in activities that will produce a kid. Like, that seems very simple to me, but of course, the left tends not to be, how can I say this, smart. They tend not to be very smart. You kind of have to slow things down for them a little bit. Boy, the comments on this video are going to be insane, bro. Goodness gracious. Oh, my goodness. But guys, you're talking about entire populations of these states that are saying, I believe this and I believe this. Either way, there's going to be entire populations in states that are not happy. And I'm telling you, there will be a state, at least in my opinion, this is the way that I see this going. I believe that whatever choice the Supreme Court makes in this situation, if this is appealed to the Supreme Court, okay, I believe that the Supreme Court's decision, there will be a state that tries to secede. Now, this is what you need to understand about secession. There is no situation where a state secedes from the Union where there is not violence. There is no situation where a state secedes from the Union where there is not some form of violence. Now, to back up my claim of this, I want you to imagine that the Supreme Court says that abortion is now banned because embryos are human beings and life begins at conception, and it is now under law that these human beings in the womb have the same rights as you and I, and they deserve not to be killed. Okay, so we've established that. Once again, hypothetical situation here, but just imagine Supreme Court has ruled that. California says they're going to secede. Guess where about 90% of the food in this country is produced? California. Okay. I can tell you right now, this country's not going to get down with that. having 90% of the food production in this country just walk right out the door. Yeah, let's be honest here. It's not going to fly. Okay. Now, I want you to imagine that a state like, let's say a state like Louisiana decided that they were going to secede from the Union because of the other way around. Yeah, that's not going to fly either because Louisiana controls the mouth of the Mississippi River. There's a lot of trade that goes up and down the Mississippi River out into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a whole thing, okay? Guys, geography, resources, different states control different things. I believe that okay, imagine Montana or Wyoming. Okay, these are red states. Okay, imagine one of them decides to leave. I believe, I could be wrong. You can fact check me, it's fine. I believe there's quite a lot of nuclear missile silos in the state of Montana. Yeah, what do they do with those if they choose to leave the Union, if they choose to secede? How does that go down? I imagine that the federal government of the United States is going to want their nukes back. But what if Montana says no? Or what if Wyoming says no? Guys, I think you can see how this could get pretty hairy pretty quickly. Okay? Ultimately, I could be wrong. I truly hope that I'm wrong. Okay? But we have to make a decision. Is this something that is worth fighting for? Now, my personal opinion, it absolutely is. And the reason why I believe that is because not only am I a Christian, and from a religious perspective, I believe that every human being in the womb is a human being created by God. But I'm not just looking at this from a religious perspective. Also looking at this from a scientific perspective. Let's go to this article here. So, this Maureen Kondik, she is a doctor. Let's read her bio right here. Dr. Kondik is an associate professor of neurobiology at the University of Utah School of Medicine with an adjunct appointment in the Department of Pediatrics. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Chicago and her doctorate from the University of California at Berkeley. Her research focuses on the role of stem cells in development and regeneration and has been nationally recognized by both the Basil O'Connor and the McKnight Awards. Okay, so this is a woman, we've established, this is a woman that understands what she's talking about. Okay, she's well-versed in science and in the sciences as a whole. Okay, this is an article that she wrote, A Scientific View of When Life Begins. So, let's get into her article. The question of when life begins has been answered in a variety of ways by different religious and philosophical traditions throughout the ages, leading many to conclude the question cannot be definitively answered. Yet, what does science tell us about when life begins? One of the basic insights of modern biology is that life is continuous, with living cells giving rise to new types of cells and ultimately to new individuals. Therefore, in considering the question of when a new life begins, we must address the first fundamental question of when a new cell, distinct from sperm and egg, comes into existence. The scientific basis of distinguishing one cell type from another rests on two criteria: differences in what something is made of, its molecular composition, and differences in how the cell behaves. These two criteria are universally agreed upon and employed throughout the scientific enterprise. They are not religious beliefs or matters of personal opinion. They are objective, verifiable scientific criteria that determine precisely when a new cell type is formed. Based on these criteria, the joining or fusion of sperm and egg clearly produces a new cell type, the zygote, or one-cell embryo. Cell fusion is a well-studied and very rapid event occurring in less than a second. Because the zygote arises from the fusion of two different cells, it contains all the components of both sperm and egg, and therefore this new cell has a unique molecular composition that is distinct from either gamete. Thus, the zygote that comes into existence at the moment of sperm-egg fusion meets the first scientific criterion for being a new cell type. Its molecular makeup is clearly different from that of the cells that gave rise to it. She's talking about the sperm and the egg have now come together and created a completely new cell in the form of an embryo or a one-cell embryo or a zygote. Okay. Subsequent to sperm-egg fusion, events rapidly occur in the zygote that do not normally occur in either sperm or egg. Within minutes, the zygote initiates a change in its internal state that will, over the next 30 minutes, block additional sperm from binding to the cell surface. Thus, the zygote acts immediately to oppose the function of the gametes from which it is derived. While the goal of both sperm and egg is to find each other and to fuse, the first act of the zygote, which is the new cell, is to prevent any further binding of sperm to the cell surface. Clearly, the zygote has entered into a new pattern of behavior and therefore meets the second scientific criterion for being a new cell type. What is the nature of the new cell that comes into existence upon sperm-egg fusion. Most importantly is the zygote. Is the zygote merely another human cell, like a liver cell or a skin cell? Well, let's get into that. Or is it something else? Just as science distinguishes between different types of cells, it also makes clear distinctions between cells and organisms. Both cells and organisms are alive, yet organisms exhibit unique characteristics that can reliably distinguish them from mere cells. An organism is designed as a complex structure of interdependent and subordinate elements whose relations and properties, lots of reading, I apologize, but I truly believe this is important. That's why I'm going through the painstaking task of explaining this to people, okay? Because I truly believe there's not a lot of people out there that understand this, okay? An organism is defined as a complex structure of interdependent and subordinate elements whose relations and properties are largely determined by their function in the whole. And two, an individual constituted to carry on the activities of life by means of organs separate in function but mutually dependent, a living being. Merriam-Webster, this definition stresses the interaction of parts in the context of a coordinate whole as the distinguishing feature of an organism. Organisms are living beings. Therefore, another name for a human organism is a human being, an entity that is a complete human rather than a part of a human. Human beings can be distinguished from human cells using the same kind of criteria scientists use to distinguish different cell types. A human being, i.e. a human organism, is composed of human parts, cells, proteins, RNA, DNA. Yet it is different from a mere collection of cells because it has the characteristic molecular composition and behavior of an organism. It acts in an interdependent and coordinated manner to carry on the activities of life. Aha! The leftists say, aha! I think we've got you. We've got you. You've proven yourself wrong there, Kendall. Yeah, let's continue. Mind you, we just read this woman's bio, okay? She is clearly the smartest person in the room here. Okay? She is smarter than me. She is smarter than everyone that is watching this video, I can tell you. Okay. Goodness, where was I? Right here. Human embryos from the one-cell zygote stage forward show uniquely integrated organismal behavior that is unlike the behavior of mere human cells. Did you hear that? Let me read that again. Organismal behavior that is unlike the behavior of mere human cells. The zygote produces increasingly complex tissues, structures, and organs that work together in a coordinated way. Importantly, the cells, tissues, and organs produced during development do not somehow generate the embryo, as if there were some unseen, mysterious manufacturer directing this process, which, of course, she can't prove because, what if God designed it that way? I'll just leave that there. I know the comments are gonna blow up and it's gonna be insane. I'm mentally preparing myself for the chaos. Okay, they are produced by the embryo as it directs its own development to more mature stages of human life. This organized, coordinated behavior of the embryo is the defining characteristic of a human organism. In contrast to human embryos, human cells are alive and under some circumstances, they can assemble into primitive tissues and structures. Yet under no circumstances do mere human cells produce the kind of coordinated interactions necessary for building a fully integrated human body like the zygote does. They do not produce tissues in a coherent manner and do not organize them so as to sustain the life of the entity as a whole. They produce tumors, i.e. parts of the human body, in a chaotic, disorganized manner. They behave like cells, not like organisms. She's talking about regular human cells in this area. We just talked about embryos and how embryos do not act like mere human cells do. Now she talks about how human cells, I'll read this again. Human cells, they produce tumors, i.e. parts of the human body, in a chaotic, disorganized manner. They behave like cells, not like organisms. So, we've clearly established here that Embryos are not just mere cells. They are zygotes, and those zygotes do not act like a mere human cell does. It acts as a organism. So, the science is right there, ladies and gentlemen. And I get it. You guys can come up here and say, oh, well, this is probably like it's a biased source. Okay, well, here's Princeton University. Okay, Princeton University, just the bastion of conservative republicanism. It's not. It's not. Princeton University also states this. Guys, this is the scientific consensus. This is what science has always stated. Life begins at conception. This is the reality. Now, you can sit there and you can try to argue that. That's fine. But there's a lot of people throughout history who have been wrong. And if you choose to argue with this, you would be one of them. Okay? I don't know what else to tell you people on the left. You're wrong. Life begins at conception. These are human organisms, human beings. Like she stated in her writings, another name for a human organism is a human being. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, and in the opinion of science, basic biology, these are human beings that should have the rights, at least the right to not be killed in the womb, as the same rights that you and I have. Now, ultimately, I do not know what is going to happen in this situation. I don't. This could go a whole host of different ways. I mean, ultimately, the Supreme Court could choose just to not listen to the case, and then it would just stay within the bounds of Alabama. This Alabama Supreme Court decision, it would stay within the bounds of that state. However, I don't see them doing that. I really don't. Ultimately, this is a question that has gone on long enough. It truly has. Despite the chaos, despite the craziness that despite the pressure that this could put on our country as a whole, I think that this is a task that needs to happen. This is a case that needs to be taken up by the Supreme Court, and we need an answer for what the Supreme Court is going to decide as to, are they human beings or are they not? We know what God says. I mean, it says it in the Bible. I'm speaking as a Christian here. If you don't want to believe in that, that's fine. I couldn't care less. I know what my beliefs are. That's okay. You don't have to believe the same thing I do. But speaking as a Christian here, God said, before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. Okay? So we know what religious opinions are. Now you know what basic biology and basic science, what science's opinion is on this matter. What else is there? Philosophy? Like there's a lot of philosophy out there that is not based in any reality. That is not based in facts. That is not based in science. That is not based on anything other than some human thinking. I don't think that that's going to fly in court. Ultimately, if this is taken up by the Supreme Court, I do think that this could very well be the end of abortion in America, which, in my opinion, would be fantastic because I like babies to be born so that they can live and prosper. Yeah, there's going to be some babies that are born into cruddy situations. That's life. Sometimes, parents choose to make poor decisions, like having unprotected sex when you are in a very poor financial situation, or whenever you are, whenever one of the parents is an abusive piece of garbage who does not want to have kids. Okay, or maybe whatever. Pick your poison, man. I mean, life is life, dude. Like sometimes life sucks. Sometimes life is hard. Yeah, it's going to happen. There's going to be some kids that are born into some crummy situations, into some crummy homes, and that sucks. But ultimately, this is why we have the adoption system. By the way, adoption is far too expensive. It is far too expensive. There's legislation right now in the Texas House to permanently bring down the price of adoptions. It obviously would not apply to across the country. It would apply to just the state of Texas. But I believe that there needs to be legislation like this all over the country. There has to be legislation like this in every single state. Guys, the adoption prices are insane. And I'm not going to get off on another tangent on that because I could talk about that in a whole nother video. But ultimately, adoption prices need to be brought down. There needs to be more of an effort into helping kids, obviously, after they are born. After there needs to be changes to how the state takes custody of these kids and the adoption system, the foster care system. All that needs to be changed. Okay, there's a lot of changes that do need to happen. I'll submit that to you guys. You people on the left that complain about, oh, the right doesn't care about people, about these babies after they're born, which is not true because Republicans are more likely to adopt than Democrats are. That's just a fact. But, I've looked at multiple studies here. It's a fact. More Republicans adopt than Democrats do. Okay. However, I will submit to you that there are some policies that need to be changed within the system. Okay. That does not mean that these kids do not deserve to live. It doesn't mean that. All of these kids deserve to live. For example, I am disgusted every day by the state of New York. For all of you far leftists out there who complain about race and things like that in America, did you know that there are more black children who are aborted, who are killed in the womb than are born in the state of New York? In the state of New York, there are more black children who are murdered in the womb than are born. So what does that tell you? It tells you that unless more black people start moving there, which, seeing how the state of New York looks right now, there's not a whole lot of job opportunity there. So probably not going to be a lot of people moving there anytime soon. It tells us that the black population is getting smaller in the state of New York. It's getting smaller. And over the decades, it will eventually just evaporate. The black population within the state of New York will just evaporate. Within the state of New York, the black population of New York essentially is being genocided. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's just a fact. More black babies in the state of New York are killed in the womb than are born. So over the decades, the population will go down and will eventually be zero. Unless, like I said, people move there, which is probably not going to happen. I don't know, man. I don't know. This is a huge decision. It could have major ramifications for the country as a whole. But I think this is important. This conversation of where life begins, it's gone on way too long. It's gone on way too long. We need some kind of legal representation to step in and answer this question. I know what religion says. I know what Christ said. I know what God said in the Bible, in His Word. We clearly see what science says, basic biology says. That, in my opinion, should... it lines up with God and it lines up with science. How are we arguing with this? How is this even a question, in my opinion? But, of course, like I said, the left, it takes them a little longer to catch up, I guess. I don't make the rules. I just play by them, Well, sometimes I don't play by them. If the left is creating the rules, I don't like to play by those rules because they like I said, they're a little slow. But I'm not gosh, this is just I'm telling you, the comments are going to be insane on this video. It's going to be crazy. I'm mentally preparing myself. But guys, like I said, this is something that needs to be this is a question that needs to be answered legally. Science has already answered this. God, in my opinion, has already answered this. Okay? So legally now, we need a definitive answer in this country. Is it going to cause some chaos? Yes. There's going to be far left extremists that don't like this. Or in the other case, there's going to be people who believe in life, who believe that babies shouldn't be murdered in the womb, who are not going to like this. It's going to cause a lot of chaos depending on the answer that the Supreme Court chooses to give us. I don't know, man. I don't know where we go from here. All I know is that 2024 is crazy. We just got here like 5 minutes ago. We just got to 2024 5 minutes ago, and it's just insane. We're losing our minds here in this country. I don't know, man. I guess we'll see. We'll see if this even goes to the Supreme Court or not, but ultimately, I don't know. I really don't. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I'll have another video coming for you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down in the comment section, and share the show with your friends. Follow me on all the socials down in the description. Hit that notification bell so that you can be notified whenever we put out new videos. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.